Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield, and we're sponsored by Brain Trust. If you're interested in learning how to be a better communicator, personally and professionally, go to braintrustgrowth.com. And today, I've been looking forward to today so much because we have a repeat guest. And if you are new to the Driving Change show, Kevin Williams was one of our favorite episodes, not just because we thought so, but because you thought so. It's one of the most downloaded episodes that we had in a previous season. And just having Kevin back, he's a friend, he's a brother. He gets what it's like to go out and understand how to use his gifts to make an impact, to drive change and have purpose. If you know him, you know he's a man of many talents. If you don't know him, you're going to get to know him really well on this episode. He's an extraordinary guitarist, a gifted comedian, now that's debatable, a dynamic speaker, and of course, the longtime band leader and resident funny guy for Bill and Gloria Gaither and the Gaither Vocal Band. Now, he's had a career spanning 37 years. Now, he looks like he's about 25, so I don't understand how he's done this, but he's graced some of the most iconic stages in the world, from Carnegie Hall to the Grand Ole Opry to the Sydney Opera House. He's played in over, you ready for this? 4,000 recording projects. He's worked with music legends across multiple genres and even co-hosts Bill Gaither's Homecoming Radio, which reaches millions. And he has the distinction of being the longest running band leader on a Christian music TV series in history. Now, all that's great, but one of the things that I was really attracted to about Kevin is his heart. And beyond the music and the laughs, he's a true servant leader and a heart for driving change and making a difference. In 2014, he founded Kevin's Kids, which we're going to get into a little bit more today. It's a charity dedicated to supporting children in need in his home state, the bluegrass state of Kentucky. And on April 12th, he's hosting his annual charity concert at the First Baptist Church in Russell Springs, Kentucky, featuring one of his good friends, and probably you know him as Mark Lowry. And they're all continuing to just spread that mission of spreading joy, hope, and encouragement. So without further ado, in the long-winded wind-up, my friend, your friend, everyone's friend that knows him, Kevin Williams, welcome back to Driving Change. It's an honor, brother.
That's the best introduction I've ever had in my life. I feel like I'm at my own funeral. So thanks.
You better raise the bar in your life, Kevin. I know, that's all I know.
And all I got to say is, well, thanks, Jeff.
Well, as you know, it's an honor to have you back. And the first time we had you on, I felt like you and I could have talked for 5 hours and it would have just kept on going.
Yeah.
Now, the rest of the audience might have gotten bored. I don't know, but you and I certainly wouldn't have. We just have a lot of kindred spirit in a lot of ways. And so let's jump back in and let's we've had so many new people listening to the show now since the last season, since you were on. Give folks that maybe don't know you from the last episode a little bit of your background, where you come from, a little of that origin story, and some of those Kentucky roots that have drawn you back to really wanting that charity to be part of your mission.
I am proud to be from Kentucky. I am a hillbilly, or they used to call us hillbillies. Now they call us Appalachian Americans, so proud to wear that. And I live in Nashville. I moved here in the late 80s for the music business and have made my career here. But it's about 2.5, 3 hours from my hometown, which is Russell Springs, Kentucky, population 2,500, right on Lake Cumberland. It's a beautiful place. And that'll always be my hometown. I know the people there, and they know me. They watched me grow up, and moved there when I was in my first grade year. My mom and dad were from 12 miles from there, really, and we bounced around a couple different places. Dad was trying to find work, and so we ended up in that beautiful area, Russell County, Kentucky, and my mom went to work at a Dollar General store. She was a clerk in a store for 14 years, and then a Christian bookstore for another dozen years probably after that. Dad was a factory worker, found work at they made women's clothing back then in the 70s, and so yeah, it was a great place to grow up, and I learned a lot about community there. I started, my mom had me in church, Jeff, from the time I was just little bitty. And so about 3 times a week, at least 3 times a week, we were in church. My faith then comes from this background of learning to love music and love people and love the Lord at an early age. And I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. I was dragging a guitar around when I was in diapers. I had a little toy guitar, and I knew I was supposed to do that, and I didn't know why. There's no music. My mom, dad are non-musical, and I'm an only child, which explains a lot. And so I didn't have those influences immediately on me, but somehow they put me to sleep with the radio going, and we had records in the house. I was just enthralled with all kinds of music. I had everything from Johnny Cash to Diana Ross and the Supremes. I mean, I was listening to everything. And so I had a picture of the Beatles, and I don't even know if I'd heard their music at that time, but I knew who they were, and gosh, those guitars looked great to me. And so I began to play. I took lessons from a wonderful man. His name is Larry Beasley, and he's still up there teaching to this day. My guitar lessons when I was 12 years old, they were $7 a piece. And I don't know how my mom even managed to get the $7 for the lessons, but she knew it was going to do something for me. Keep me out of trouble is probably what she surmised. And that it did. It actually directed my life. God was using that in a powerful way. And so nowadays I go back there and I get to play music with my guitar teacher. He's one of the foremost banjo players in bluegrass music down through the years. He played for Bill Monroe on the road. He played for Carl Story and Larry Sparks, a bunch of guys that bluegrass fans would know. And his name is Larry Beasley, and he still teaches to this day. And I just have so much respect for him. So that was one of the first, solid relationships that kind of took me on a path. I remember he would take me out and we would play music different places. And I was learning this whole time. I'm 14 years old probably by this time. And then another friend of mine said, I was playing in my church, of course, at the time. And a buddy of mine said, we've got a gospel group and you need to be on our bus and traveling with us. And they would travel maybe 30 to 60 miles or something, around. We would call that a regional artist. And the name of the group was the Rock of Ages Quartet. And I was on a bus at 14, and I was just enamored and having the time of my life. And consequently, I've been traveling on the weekends and playing my guitar since age 14, and I'll be 60 years old this year. So it's been an amazing journey that God's used that. We didn't have a lot of money. I explained our situation there. And I remember in the 6th grade, the forms came home for the lunch thing at school. And I asked Dad what he made, and I asked Mom what she made, and I added it up. And we were in this column that said poverty, below the poverty line. And I knew what that was. I didn't know we were there. I knew we didn't have a lot, but, and so that's the first time I became acquainted with really where we were in this economic situation. Both hardworking parents, but still not making ends meet really. And so to pick up the pieces there, this is what's interesting about, I think, the day and time that I grew up, not to mention the rural setting, the beauty of that. We had church family that kind of filled in the gaps. We had neighbors that filled in the gaps. Even in that little trailer park, everybody knew everybody and that would help out. So this all came to light in my 40s when I was talking to my mom one day. And I said, remember that coat you got me for Christmas that year? And I think I was 6 or 7. Corduroy coat, loved it. And she said, oh, yeah, you love that coat. And I said, yeah. I was just recalling memories. And she said, our neighbors got you that coat. And I didn't know that. It was given to me by my mom and dad, but I didn't know they couldn't afford the coat. So that started my wheels spinning, really just tugged at my heart. And I said, okay, how in this day and time where it's so polarized and our culture is quite isolated, You see people going through life on their phones, and we don't know who's next door really. And so it's just not like it was. So who's going to be there for the kids nowadays? I had two hardworking parents in the home. A lot of kids don't have two parents in the home. In our area, the statistics say that 1 out of 3 kids is in poverty. And so those kids a lot of times are being raised by grandparents or siblings or something. So the whole charity thing, and we'll talk more about that, began simply from this kid right here wanting to do something for kids like I was. And God has honored that, and the community has all pitched in. And that's a beautiful story. The music side of things, I kept on playing and moved to Nashville. I was working in radio at the time. I worked in small market radio for 4 years. And then moved to Nashville when I was 22. I think I knew one person, maybe two here. And I thought, I'm just going to do it. And I got a little apartment. I didn't have a couch and I didn't have a bed. I had 2 guitars and a metronome. And
that's all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah,
right?
because I've hit the big time. And I sat in my little apartment and practiced, and I didn't get any work. I lived here 6 months, and I was working on the weekends with a group at that time called Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters. He was a humorist, and they did wonderful music. They were big in the 60s and 70s in the Southeast. They were from Atlanta. So I was with them in the late 80s. So I was on the backside of that career, their career, and it was just total class. I just loved it. But through the week with recording sessions and what I was trying to get established in Nashville, it wasn't happening. And so I moved back to Kentucky after 6 months. I starved, and moved back home and paid my bills off. And 4 months after that, I worked at a Radio Shack. Does anybody remember a Radio Shack, what that was?
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
That was
absolutely.
Yeah, before Best Buy, we had Radio Shack. And so I worked there, paid my bills off, and moved back to Nashville. My dad said, that's maybe one of the craziest things I've ever heard. Go do it. And so I did. And some things started happening at that point. And it's about 1990, probably by that point. And so I started getting work as a session musician. A lot of people might not know what that is, but you show up to a recording studio, you're booked there with other musicians to create a recording project for somebody. And a lot of times you don't even know who it is till you get there, but the producer books you. And it might be somebody you've heard of, it might not be, might be a breaking artist, And I would do lots of different styles. Most of what I've done, and I'll gladly say this, is Christian music. But within that, it might sound like a country feel or a Latin feel or classical kind of thing. So you have to be prepared for all of that. And I loved that challenge. I wanted to be that. So I started getting some of that work. And then in 1992, after meeting Bill Gaither on a recording session, I played for him on 3 different projects. I got a call from his office asking if I'd want to go out on the road with the Gaither Vocal Band. And I prayed about that for 1.2 seconds and said yes. And
God spoke quickly.
I'm so glad he did. And that has started, Jeff, a 32-year friendship and musical association with the Gaithers. I'm still there. They've not kicked me out yet. And I'm so proud of that. And so Mr. Gaither is 89 years old now and still doing what he does at a very high level. And I get to see that and experience that every night. I feel like I've had a 30-year master class,
Right.
And so that is sort of my weekend job, if you will. And then through the week, I'm in the studios. And then my passion is what we get to do for kids. So maybe that's an adequate summary.
All right, I've got questions. I have questions.
Okay.
So before we go into the Nashville I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So first of all, I had this kind of thought. I'm like, man, Kevin needs to write this book called The Legend of the Corduroy Coat. Life lessons of servant leadership from Kevin Williams. So there's something in there, right? So you just should probably put that in your think-a-later.
I got it.
There's something really magical about that corduroy coat. It's almost like the Technicolor dream coat for you is the corduroy coat.
It is.
And I think about when did you realized at one point, okay, we're poor, and you recognize what that means. When did you recognize, first of all, where did you get when and where did you get your first guitar
Okay.
that you actually would say, I could play this? This is a real guitar. This isn't like some,
Right.
child's play thing. It's an actual real guitar. Where'd that come from?
The first guitar period was a guitar that my dad had bought that we saw in Eastern Kentucky, and there was a little restaurant we would go eat at, and like a pawn shop kind of thing next door. So it was a little cheap guitar, and the first real guitar came probably by the time I was 14, 15 years old. There's a country music star named Steve Wariner. He's a big deal, and Steve and I became friends in my youth. His mom and dad had kind of retired and moved back to our area. They were originally from there.
Okay.
So Steve didn't grow up there, but his mom and dad did, and his dad ran a little music store that Steve owned. And I bought my first real guitar from Roy Warner, and it was a Gibson Epiphone, 3/4 size, and I loved that guitar, and I wish I still had it. I don't even know what ever happened to that guitar, but that's the one that I started traveling with and just loved.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, Steve, I remember Steve Warner's music a lot back in the day. So that's a fascinating little nugget.
Yeah.
When did you realize, and I know this is going to be an interesting question, because I mean, you play guitar backwards. I'm left-handed. I play it the right way. You play it the wrong way. But to listen to the two of us play, people will clearly say you play it the right way. I play it the wrong way. But when did you realize I'm actually pretty good on guitar? I feel pretty confident now that I understand how to play this well enough to not make a fool of myself in front of people. When did that epiphany happen?
It's a great question, and I love how you come up with these because you're always exploring mindset. That was a tough one for me. I remember thinking at about 17 and 18 that I felt a call to do this for the rest of my life. And I didn't know if it was a vocation or just a ministry call. And that's something everybody has to come to terms with as well. I wanted it to be a vocation, but I didn't know. And everybody, I had well-meaning, good friends who said, "Oh, don't go down to Nashville. They'll eat you up." That was what one guy said. Another one said, "It's just so competitive. I hate to see you get hurt." And yet, something in me kept gnawing at me, going, I don't know. Everybody told me in my circle, "Boy, you're great. I love to hear you play," all of that. And they did. They were sweet and they were encouraging to me. But as far as climbing in the ranks, who was capable of evaluating that? I didn't have anybody saying that's above average or that's, that knew what it took. And so I finally, I wrestled with this all the time and I prayed about it, and God, as he does, gives you opportunities to serve. It was always an opportunity or call to do some other kind of crazy thing, and I would go do that, and then something magical would happen. It was strange. So, but I when I moved to Nashville, I met a session player named Bobby All, and you could Google him and find him on all kinds of records. He was playing on Trisha Yearwood and Brooks and Dunn and everybody, and I played on a TV show, and he was part of the house band. And I knew who he was. I'd listened to him. And so I went up and introduced myself. I was very nervous. And I befriended him and started going to sessions with him and eating breakfast and just learning from him. And I put him in the position of evaluating me. I said, "Will you tell me what I'm doing right and doing wrong here?" And I remember one of the first things he said to me, he said, "You've got really good ideas. You just need some finesse." I thought, wow, that's gentle and good. And so I'm on the right track, so you're saying there's a chance. That's what I said. So I felt like I was on the right track, and I had somebody that could whittle on me, like the old timers used to whittle, something beautiful out of a piece of wood. And so that took some time, but I finally had found somebody that was willing to dedicate some time to me and make me better. And yeah, I did have a chance, at that point. So I think it started with believing in myself at some point. I definitely believed in the call that I had,
right?
Whether I believed in my talent that much or not. But then actively seeking somebody who could kind of validate that in a professional way.
See, I think that I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so important. And if the audience is listening, is when you feel like you have a passion for something, yes, your parents, your mom, your neighbors, and people will probably encourage you. Yes, you're really good at that, whatever that thing is. You got to believe it first and foremost, that you have a passion and a call to do something. And then you got to keep challenging yourself to from a preparation and a practice standpoint, to believe that you're getting better. But then to your point, you got to find somebody who you know is really good at this, whatever this is, and get some real honest feedback. And I think we're in a world today where I think everybody wants to, they want to go on social media and just, thumbs up and like everything and everybody. And then you get a false sense of that, not only a false sense of security around a skill that you don't actually have, but you're missing a calling in your life that God has planned for you because you're not being told the truth.
Right.
And I think having that passion to go seek out people, and I hear this a lot, like, well, I can't find somebody. Well, you got to work hard to go, who are those people in your life that you look up to that are doing the thing that you want to do? And just do not give in until you get someone to tell you the truth. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. I don't know if we talked about this last episode or not, but back in my early to mid 20s, I had dreams of being in Nashville and leading a Southern rock country band, and we were doing really well in the Cincinnati area. And I was our lead singer and songwriter and guitarist, and one thing led to another, and I just didn't do it. I went the business route, but I always had this kind of yearning because I'm a storyteller, right? I'm like, I just love music and I love storytelling. So I always fashioned myself as a songwriter, and I'd written songs over the years and yada, yada, yada. And over the past few years, I've gotten to be really good friends with Jimmy Yeary, who you might know Jimmy down there in Nashville. He's
great,
I drive
great songwriter, great guy.
Right? So we've become really good friends, and he is just such a genuinely kind and good human being. And I told him one day, I finally got the nerve up to go, hey, I'm going to play some of my songs for you, and I want you to tell me whether or not you think these are any good or not. And I played him a bunch of songs that I'd written, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, 3 or 4 songs. And true, this is your story with your studio musician.
Right.
And Jimmy looks at me and he goes, yeah, those aren't half bad. In fact, they might have been pretty good back in the early 90s. and the point of it is I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, I'm like, what do you, and he taught me 2 or 3 things right there in the moment that said, I can tell you were raised in 80s and 90s country because you're right like that. And if you really want to be a great songwriter today, you got to think differently. And then he lays out 3 things. And I had never in a million years considered those 3 things.
That's beautiful.
And so I say that to say to those out there listening, whatever it is you're trying to be good at, find those people who have been good at it and ask them to give you real honest feedback. And by the way, someone might tell you, this isn't your gift.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you have to listen to that.
Right.
But if 3 people say this isn't your gift, you probably ought to pray harder on what your gift is, right?
That's true. And depending on how qualified they are to make that, that statement to you.
That's exactly right.
And one other thing, Jeff, that's always kind of been a little bit of a road sign for me is as far as, what your gifting is and what you're called to do and that kind of thing is what do you find yourself sitting around practicing on all, I sat in that little apartment for 6 months and practiced for hours upon hours, waiting for the phone to ring. Okay. And I didn't begrudge that. I loved that. I was passionate about practicing. So some people I know want it to happen just like that. And they are passionate about performing, or they are passionate about the public side of whatever it is that they do. But Zig Ziglar, our dear friend, from years gone by, he would practice incessantly on a speech he was going to give, even though he'd given it 1,000 times before, because he wanted to be the best and because it totally charged him up. That's who he was. So what do you find yourself doing there? Where is it that you lose track of time, and how do you find yourself manifesting that passion? What is that? Because I sometimes think what we think our call is, or our gift, whatever, and what the real path is can be very close, and we can miss it, like you said, because we're focused on something else. And so I think you have to get down to business with that. And for me, it was agony. At 17, I was praying every night. I just felt this tug. But I had and you'll love this, I had a safety kind of mindset that was handed to me by growing up in a poverty situation like I did, and by parents that cared. So don't risk too much, you could fail. Well, but by following my path, I was going to have to risk everything. So I was in a conundrum there. So here was my plan B. And I hear this, thing about just throw it caution to the wind and don't have a plan B, and that'll prove to yourself or whatever. I get that. But this was my story. My plan B was, if this all fails, I'm going to come back. I had 2 years of electrical training, and I'm going to get licensed as a state inspector. And so I could wire houses, and I could also inspect houses, and I would have a pension and that kind of thing. So that was my fallback, if you will, my plan B. But I didn't feel called to any of that. I felt called to this risky, wild, adventure that I was going to embark upon. So I don't know if that was right or wrong, but that was my story and that was my mindset. And I found that I had to eventually commit to what I was doing and go, well, I guess there's no turning back. I didn't necessarily burn the bridges behind me, but I just focused forward and I kept moving one step in front of the other, forward all the time in that path. And God honored that, man. That was, something I saw. As I took one step, he would take 2 or 3 steps for me. and the right people would show up, because I was focused on that. Don't you see that in your life where when you become intensely focused on this, the opportunities do show up. They may look different, but they're showing up and the people are showing up.
Yeah, the harder you try, the luckier you get, kind of thing, right? You said a couple things. I mean, it's so powerful. I think it was maybe Tony Robbins. He might have not been the first one to say it, but people are rewarded in public for what they spent hours and days and months and years practicing in private.
Yeah,
and I think that what you're getting at that I'd love people to hear, and maybe this is going to speak to someone's spirit today, is what are you doing in the waiting? Because if you believe that you're on the right path, you've seen the billboards, you're on the right highway, you just don't know what God's doing ahead of you to line up the right things
right.
for you to be, really taking the right exit. And what are you doing in the waiting to improve whatever that skill, that gift, that talent is? And I tell people this all the time. They come up to me after a keynote and say, "Man, I really love that talk, and I want to be a keynote speaker. I want to be whatever. What do you do?" And I said, "Listen, I give these talks every week somewhere, and guess what I did in my hotel last night?
Yeah,
I went through the entire talk, and I've given it 1,000 times, and I went because the audience." So that's, I think, the point you're making is no matter what you're doing in your life, and it doesn't have to be being a musician or a television host or a keynote speaker. Heck, being an electrician, like what is your mindset telling you in the in between to get you more and more aligned to be better at? I think we're designed to continue to improve because it helps us walk more, I think, intentionally in our purpose. I love that.
Love that. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about, because I'm, generally just genuinely envious of your entire career and everything that you've done and live vicariously through you. So you get with the Gaithers, which is a big break for you. You've done some studio work. And for those not familiar with studio work down there in Nashville, I mean, you got your A players and your B players and your C players, and then your A+ player. Kevin's an A+ player. Like anyone would be thrilled to have Kevin on any record, anywhere, from any artist and any genre. So the work that you've done there, and you're known for that, studio work like that, is just crazy to me. I mean, listen to the guys like you play, I just get chills. So the Gaithers give you a break, and you get on the road with the Gaithers. How did that then transform into, hey, we're going to do this whole television thing, and we want you to be a part of that?
They were doing so at the point that I came in, late '92. They were sort of winding down the vocal band, if you can believe that. I know this sounds strange, but when you think about it, the Gaither trio, Bill and Gloria, started out with their brother, his brother Danny, but the Gaither trio that a lot of us would remember would be Bill, Gloria, and Gary McSpadden. That had crested in the 70s and then kind of gone down. And then the vocal band started about 81. That had crested and gone down in some way. Everything has a cycle. And they had so many powerhouse people come through that vocal band. It was amazing. And then they started Bill did this homecoming video, and it didn't start out that way. He did a little video to pay tribute to some of his heroes. And they had cameras rolling, and they captured some magic that was happening way beyond what they were there to do. They were there to do one song, And so they aired that, and it got some traction, and then they they did another little video kind of on purpose at that point, and that got some traction. And so Bill was finding out that this was touching people, and so this homecoming thing took off, and it became a weekly TV thing. By '95, we were touring what we called a homecoming tour. It was the something like the 7th largest tour of all genres one year.
Wow.
You know, ahead of Elton John and Rod Stewart and all this. It was crazy.
I mean, there were Swifties before there were Swifties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Her parents were coming to our concert. No, but
That's right.
it was interesting, and we would be I came in on the 3rd video, I think it was videotaping that they did, and so by '95, '96, we're in arenas, NBA arenas every night with
Wow.
somewhere between 14 and 18,000 mostly a night. You know, it might be 20, might be 16, whatever, but in that neighborhood every night. And it was massive. And we had all of these heroes, these artists that I had heard as a kid. I get to play for them now. And so our concerts were 4 hours and 15 minutes long, Jeff. It was long. And I got to play for everybody. And then the vocal band had a resurgence because of this. And so it was a great time. And then, we carry that through. The radio show developed at some point. They had a magazine, Homecoming Magazine, that I had a humor column in for years. I've been doing, the radio show is 20 years old, and I think I've been there about 17 of that 20 maybe, because I wasn't in right at the beginning of that. And I get to be wacky and do, I see the world through a little different window than everybody else does. And so I love getting to make people laugh. One of my passions is just putting smiles on faces. And so if that's through something stupid that I say or opening a door for somebody, playing a song, whatever, I'm in. So that's all been a part of that. And then, of course, however many tapings we've done down through the years, beautiful moments where we got to interface with other people. I remember you mentioned the Carnegie Hall thing. I got to play bridge over troubled waters with Paul Simon at Carnegie Hall. How cool is that? And I got to do the last, I don't know how many Billy Graham crusades that he did, probably 8 or 9 of those. And the biggest crowd I ever saw was that last one he did at Flushing Meadows in New York. It was just over 100,000 people as far as I could see outdoors. And those are beautiful memories to me. And I don't know, it happened in a flash, and it was all happening as I'm watching it, almost like a movie, but I'm there.
Yeah.
And I'm getting to play for all these wonderful people. So God's truly blessed me in that way. And I still, when I settle down and come home and exhale and after supper, I'm practicing how to get from chord to chord on a guitar without squeaking, So,
Still today, you still do that.
still today. Yeah.
Wow. I'm curious. We didn't talk about this last time much, but we didn't get into the humor much.
Yeah.
And I love humor. I mean, humor is a big part of, at least, people don't necessarily appreciate all my humor all the time. But for someone when did that part of the gift start to click? Because obviously you grew up kind of in the musician part of it, and you're a studio musician, and you're connecting, you're getting on the road with people. Where did it click where you're like, hey, you know what, I should use this? The humor piece is something I feel gifted in there. And I think making people smile and laugh appropriately is something I can do really well. And where did that just kind of happen in a natural evolution, or was it very intentional?
Yeah, well, both. It's part of me. My dad was the funniest guy I ever met in my life, and he could make me laugh. He never had to say a word, and I would just laugh and tears would come out, and we had a unique relationship. And I just learned to love people who could get other people to laugh at an early age. And I was always watching Johnny Carson. I thought he was the kingpin. He just had it, his timing and the way he was self-deprecating, the way he knew he could draw a laugh out of you he would actually back up and give you time to breathe, And so I studied sort of the science of all that just by watching him. I love those Dean Martin roasts. I thought those were incredible. They'd have Don Rickles on there, and they'd have a lot of kind of musical celebrities and that kind of thing too. But then these comedians, Charlie Callis was on there, Steve Allen and all these people. I loved going back to Sid Caesar and Don Knotts and those guys. Bob Newhart, I thought was one of the most brilliant people I've ever seen in my life. Tim Conway, I loved we would watch the Carol Burnett show every Saturday night. So Tim Conway and Harvey Korman would have this chemistry. And I loved how he would try to crack him up, and get him off script. And it was pretty frequent the way he could do it. So I'm looking at my library over here, and you don't see it on camera, but I've got, up here is Seth Godin, and here's Andy Andrews, and down here's there's a Joel Osteen book, and all this, and then right next to here's the George Burns joke file book. It's like this thick, and there's Milton Berle, and there's Steve Allen. So all of these classics, I just love that. So that was the sort of who you are part. Mr. Gaither, at some point, we had Mark Lowry with us. He was with us about 13 years, I think, and then he took a little sabbatical and did some solo dates, and then came back a number of years later, and he's kind of been in and out at times. He's a wonderful, gifted communicator and comedian who can make people laugh and make them think.
Yeah.
And that always, you always say, make them laugh, make them cry. No, make them laugh, make them think. If that involves crying, that's fine. But I love when you turn that corner. So he does that well. And he was with us. And when he took his first little turn and said he was going to leave the group for a while, I had been doing some little back and forth with Mr. Gaither on stage, and that had evolved from the studio stuff. We would banter in the studios. And he would throw something out there to see what I'd say, and I would always have a clever response. I'm very rarely at a loss for a clever comeback quip kind of thing,
Yeah.
So I did that in school. I was respectful with it. I didn't, I wasn't the class clown, but I was funny, and so he loved that back and forth, that little thing, and. So we took it on stage, and it was extremely weird and left-footed when we started it, because here's the guitar player behind me saying something. This was even before Leno had his band leader, Kevin, he would play off of him. And
Yeah.
This was before that. And so I had a microphone like this, and they'd say, he'd throw me a line, and I'd go, well, and it was just awkward. It was so strange. They finally got me a little headset mic, Right. And we experimented with it. Finally, they put a camera right here on me. And the director in these big arena shows, and the director would switch that camera on and off. And boy, he was great. He knew, if I inhaled, he took my shot, And the timing of that began to work, and I began to figure out this audience. I didn't want to seem too snarky or too sarcastic.
That's my challenge.
Well, with some people, you can come off just mean and bitey, if you do that. And so I would ease in, and I naturally smile a lot. And so I think they knew I was friendly. But for a long time, maybe a year, it was, who is that guy and why is he talking, And
why does he keep popping off back there?
Why is he disrespectful, And I wasn't. I was very careful. When I would run lines by Mr. Gaither, even if it seemed impromptu on stage, I would say, what if I said this? Does that seem disrespectful in any way, And then he would give me a line or two to say, he's brilliant, He would tell me things. So what you saw on stage became a different little thing, and it's great. Nowadays, it's so natural, whether it's something we've done before or something that's happening for the first time. And I play off of any of his senior moments where he says something wrong or he, pauses to try to remember something. I just jump in, and he wants me to. That's why I'm there, sort of. And and that's become so unique and fun. It's almost like picking on Grandpa at the Thanksgiving table, and it's just fun. And so the thing I learned is you can if you get people laughing and get them relaxed, then they can accept an idea that can change their life.
Right. Absolutely.
And so we do that. We have a lot of humor, and then we'll turn the corner and say something like, a definitive statement. I believe in a hill called Mount Calvary. We have a song that we sing that I love. It says, "I then shall live," and it lists how to live as one who's been forgiven. And on and on. This beautiful lyric of Gloria Gaither's. But how did we get there? We got there by laughing and relaxing. We exhaled a little bit. We poked fun at ourselves, and then we got the idea. So I think that's very important in communicating. And I suddenly discovered, probably in my early 50s, that I was not so much a guitarist or a funny guy. I was just a communicator. And these were tools that God had given me. He gave me a guitar for a lot of years and then gave me some quips and things, and some different tools to be able to communicate with people and convey an idea. So I think it's very important, but it is naturally who I am. My wife thinks I'm the least funny person.
Isn't that always the case?
She laughs when I do it on stage, but at home I'll say something that is really funny and I get zip. I mean,
crickets.
Nothing. Yeah.
Crickets.
So I always say she's the president of the Unimpressed Women of America, the UW.
Well, my wife might be the vice president then. I'm not.
Well, that helps keep you grounded, I think. It helps me work on material. I'll go, okay, next time I say that, I'll say it better, so it's fun.
My wife's famous for her line on, "Oh no, I got it. I just didn't think it was funny."
I didn't think it was funny. Yeah, I love that. That's so good.
I'm like, you didn't get that one. I went over your head. She's like, no, I got it. I just didn't think it was funny.
Yeah. My wife will say, "Okay, whatever you need to think." Okay.
Whatever floats your boat. Well, that's such what you're tapping into that I've made a career off of is really understanding communicators and the brain science behind it. And that idea, and then for those who listen to our show a lot, they know I've had neuroscientists on, we've had our own people on, and like getting an audience to turn off their analytical network of their brain and unlock and open their emotional empathic network. Right. Humor does that. And it sets an environment where the energy changes. And now you're able to be more receptive. You're open to new ideas. You're willing to change. Versus if you just go straight in, like a lot of people tend to do, you're not. You're skeptical, you're judgmental, your self-preservation is activated, and people aren't open to those new ideas. And you just described with complete, perfect clarity a real-world case study on what we've learned through neuroscience is why great communicators are great. So there you go. So there's a science behind your greatness, Kevin.
Well, and it is, you always go back to the storytelling part, and it is all communication is storytelling in one way or another. I'm telling a story with a guitar when I'm doing that. I'm unfolding something, for somebody. Or our humor with the Gaithers, especially what I love, is very conversational, and that dimension of it in itself tells a story. Because you pick up on the fact these two guys have 30 years of history together and they're comfortable picking at each other. And, it's making me laugh. It is funny. So the story just gets beyond yourself there. When I do solo concerts, and I do about 20, 25 those a year as I have time, I tell stories about growing up in that beautiful town. I tell about that little church and going into the hardware store, and looking around, and I have a lot of funnies that have evolved out of those real life experiences that I share with audiences, and so it's all storytelling to me, and drawing you into some little path where we can walk together for a little while. Yeah. I thought the genius behind this was always Garrison Keillor. And I went to see him a year ago at the Ryman Auditorium, and he's in his 80s, and it was the 50th anniversary of Prairie Home Companion, and he had the band out there, and they were doing the radio shtick and all that stuff, and he went 3 hours nonstop. He even went through the intermission. He said, "We're going to take a 15-minute break. Some of you need to use the bathroom. Feel free to get up and go. The rest of you, if you want to stay here, let's sing." And the band, everybody had exited the stage, and he sang a cappella with the audience for 15 minutes during the intermission. Craziest thing you've ever seen. And so I'm on this whole little ride here, and everything's a story with him, and he sang songs. We sang Amazing Grace. We sang I've Been Working on the Railroad. We sang like Americana. It was so diverse and weird and awesome. And he just took us on that little journey. And so I love that you've distilled to a science what that is, what we've all just kind of been stabbing at and had to learn, maybe the hard way. But you figured out some bullet points on that can help. Somebody coming behind me can help him tremendously.
Well, what I love about it, Kevin, I want to talk about the charity and Kevin's Kids as we close. But what I love about that concept of storytelling is, and now there's been studies after study after study done in both behavioral psychology as well as neuroscience, is what happens during storytelling is it's called the transportation effect. So when you tell me a story, I actually get transported into the narrative, which then I make it my own story. And that's the key. It's no longer your story. I think it's your story because you're telling it to me, but my brain doesn't believe that. It believes that I'm a character now in your story.
Love that.
And that effect is what sucks people in and why it's so memorable. And it activates those parts of the brain where I could repeat your story because I was part of it. I feel like I was part of it. And it's an amazing mechanism of how God built our brains, and no doubt why Jesus used parables, and as a teacher, he was the ultimate storyteller because he knew that's how our brains are designed. I helped design them, right?
Right, exactly. Oh, that's brilliant. That's so good.
Well, tell us a little bit more now. I know you got a big concert coming up. In a charity concert coming up on April 12th. Give us a little bit more color on Kevin's Kids, what you're doing there, how you're scaling the corduroy coats across a multitude of kids in a population, and how we can get involved. What can we do to help support it?
It's beautiful. Thank you for that opportunity. So if you're watching this somewhere down the road, we are in 2025, and I do have a concert coming up April 12th, 2025 in Russell Springs, Kentucky. Google it and just come on. We just want you there. And it's something that we've been doing this is our 11th year. We started in 2014 with a dream of mine to be able to help kids like I was. To get in the lives of kids and positively influence them towards success. Here again, our friend Zig Ziglar said that he believed we were all designed, created for accomplishment, designed for success, and engineered. I'm saying this wrong. He said created for accomplishment, designed for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. I finally got there. And that has meant a lot to me down through the years. That's something we actually teach these kids, that you were created by a loving God that has a design and purpose for your life. And so we are trying to get in their lives with things like shoes, coats, clothing items, hygiene items, whatever it takes to stop the bleeding, sort of, in their particular situation. This is not a blanket type thing where we say everybody gets coats or everybody gets. It's individualized needs. We assess that child's needs and how we can help. And then the B part of that is when we get in their life, we can give them ideas. This is what I think is being lost on a lot of today's generation. They don't have positive role models who will get in there and say, you can do it. I've seen some qualities in you that says you're a winner. So let's talk about what that looks like. And I'm mentoring two young men right now. One's 21, one's 19. The 19-year-old he's just hungry. He's a sponge, and grew up in a wonderful home, but his dad left when he was 12, and he's kind of had to fight for what he's got in life, And so we're talking every week. We meet and we'll have lunch, and I'll say, let's talk about goals this week. How do you set goals, and what's important about goals? Let's talk about vision. Let's talk about your drive. Where does that come from? Let's talk about passion. Let's talk about being responsible. The buck stops here. Let's talk about living with honesty and integrity and what that looks like. So we've all been disappointed by somebody who had a moral failure of some sort. So how does that help you live better? How do you stay on track? With that. That's the B part of the equation, and so the B part requires the A part. And we started raising money in 2014. Our first goal was $10,000 in that town of 2,500 people. And actually, the money goes to benefit kids within the county. So about 3,000 students in that school system there, roughly. 1 in 3 of them are in poverty, but many of them need a helping hand and need somebody to, just have their back. So over 20,000 came in. That was double our first year goal. Fast forward to last year, 104,000. It's amazing. We've raised total about 600,000 now. And
Wow.
it's just, it's a community effort. And we have a lot of people from outside the state who give toward this because they are assured of 2 or 3 things here. Number one, 100% of the money that you donate gets there. We don't have a high percentage. We have a total percentage. If we take any expenses out for anything, we do mailers and we do some stuff. It's always underwritten by somebody, me or the church or somebody that we're using there. So if you look at our balance sheet, what came in of that 104,000 has gone out over here to those kids. And we use the school system to do this. It goes in a protected fund. I don't know where else you would find this other than my hometown. This is brilliant. And the school superintendent there is a man of integrity and just love this man. And I watched him grow up. I knew his grandfather. So he said, why don't we put it in a protected fund? That way you'll be satisfied. We'll have accountability for it. And if we want to pay, the board wants to use that money to pay the light bill, they can't touch it. It's in a protected fund for those needs. The money stays in the county, doesn't go anywhere else. That's why we've never used a foundation. We funnel it through a local church. This is old-fashioned, okay? And it comes through a local church treasury, so it doesn't go to the church. It goes through there, and then it passes back out to the school system for this protected fund, tax deductible, of course. And then the results, what we're seeing with the kids. We have testimonials every year. When you come to this concert, you'll see. Last year, we had a young gentleman who was graduating high school, and he'd been helped numerous times through these family resource centers that are set up each school has them. And we have a resource center manager. And they know the kids, and they assess the needs. They know the families. They go out and make home visits and that kind of thing. This young man had one parent that was incarcerated and one who was an addict. And he decided, he told me, he said, I figured I was going to have to make something out of my life on my own because they weren't going to be there. So he'd been to us numerous times, primarily for food. He would go home in the evenings and not have food. There was nobody there to make food for this young man. So he would eat at school, but he wouldn't have anything in the evenings or the weekends. And we were, taking care of some food and some clothing stuff and that kind of thing. So he enlisted he went into ROTC. He wanted to be in the Army. He wanted to fly Blackhawks. And so he was shipping out after we did our concert in April last year. He was going to ship out in May, I think, to his basic training. And we celebrated him a little bit. He came in his ROTC uniform that night. Excuse me. And he talked to everybody, and we presented him with a friend of mine runs a helicopter ambulance service. And we took him up in a helicopter for the first time in his life. He'd ever been in one. And he was flown by a Black Hawk pilot. And so that charged him up, Then he went off to basic. And I get a little FaceTime call from him every now and then since then. He'll say, hey, Mr. Williams, I'm doing fine, His statement was, I figure if you guys are going to pour into me, I owe it to you to make something out of myself.
Wow.
And that's what it's all about. So he received the message. Now, I don't know, this is hard to quantify even 11 years in. The kids that were in first grade when we started this program are now graduating seniors. So I don't know how many of those kids get the message like he does. Is it 1 in 10? Is it 1 in 100? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if it's 1, it's worth it.
Yeah, it matters, but it doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, if it's once, it matters.
So big things are happening there. Again, it's a local effort who we have a lot of help from outside people. I had one lady donated $5,000 last year. She's a realtor in Florida. She just believed in me and the passion I had for this. Another guy sent a check for $3,000. We had $10,000 check from somebody in Indiana who identifies with this because they grew up similarly and they've heard me talk about it. So that's the cause. It's called Kevin's Kids. And my website is kevinwilliamsmusic.com. The giving link will be there, or we can post it here, but it is through the church. And you'll simply go there, you'll type in an amount, and then select Kevin's Kids, and it'll go right there. Again, 100% goes to the kids. It all stays in that area. And I'm very proud of that.
So kevinwilliamsmusic.com is where we should go. And then in there we can find Kevin's Kids. And if you feel called and you're listening to help support that, I encourage you to do that. And if you're not, what I encourage you to do is maybe prayerfully consider, what are you doing in your area? What are you doing in your zip code? What are you doing to help do something of meaning, to do exactly what Kevin's doing for his? Maybe it's not the exact same thing, but what are we doing to give back and to help make the world a better place? And Kevin, you certainly are using your gifts and talents, not just in Nashville and beyond, to make the world a better place, but then back home, not forgetting where you came from, changing lives of kids now for a generation that will, we won't even know. You'll never get to know the full impact of what you're doing with Kevin's Kids this side of heaven, but you'll get to see the ledger board once you get there, I'm sure, for the next couple of generations. So thank you for what you're doing, for who you are, and just for being a good friend of the program, and as someone that I look up to and admire, both as a man of God, but also just as a person who's out there living out their gifts. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And I've learned so much from you, man. You're the way you distill information into a science there is always, I've always read those kind of books and looked to those people and people that can explain the why. And I love that about you. And thank you for having me on and to be a part of this. You have great integrity in your program, and I just appreciate everything you stand for. Love you.
We'll certainly have you back on again, and it's always going to be an honor. And we'll connect soon. And best of luck with the upcoming concert on April 12th. And just let's keep in touch. And I'd love to see what you're into and what you're working on.
Always good. Thanks, Jeff.